It was a typical Friday afternoon at Riverside High School. The campus was quieter than usual, as most students were already eager for the weekend. However, for Lara and Gabriel, two sophomores, the day was about to turn into something far stranger than they could have imagined. Lara and Gabriel were an unlikely couple. She, an introverted book lover with dark brown hair and thick-rimmed glasses, always sought refuge in the library to escape the hustle and bustle of the world around her. Gabriel, on the other hand, was outgoing and popular, with a laid-back style and an easy smile, always at the center of attention. Despite their differences, they shared one common passion: the desire to get lost in stories, whether in reality or fantasy. That afternoon, after classes, the two decided to spend some time together in the library, something Lara always enjoyed. They were alone, talking softly about books and plans for the weekend, until they noticed something strange. The usually calm and quiet atmosphere felt more still than ever. The air seemed heavier, and the bookshelves, with their worn covers and overcrowded shelves, appeared to extend beyond the boundaries of the room. "It's quieter than usual here, don't you think?" Gabriel said, looking around, feeling the same unease that he usually ignored. Lara, with a nervous smile, replied, "I love the library, but today, yes, something feels off." She was about to stand up to grab more books when suddenly, the library door slammed shut with a bang. Lara and Gabriel exchanged surprised glances. There was no one else in the room, just the two of them. Lara approached the door, trying to turn the doorknob, but it was locked. "What is happening?" Gabriel murmured, trying to open the door, but the doorknob wouldn't budge. They tried the other doors and windows of the library, but they were all locked as well. Panic began to set in. We're trapped here," Lara said, her voice tense. "But how? The library never closes early." It was then that they heard a faint sound coming from one of the more distant bookshelves. A secret door, hidden among the books, was slightly ajar. Gabriel looked at Lara, and without hesitation they both approached. When they entered through the opening, they discovered a small, dimly lit room covered in dust. In a corner, a figure sat in an old chair, her eyes fixed on the empty space. It was Clara, a senior student known for being quiet and solitary. Lara and Gabriel knew her vaguely but had never approached her. Clara looked at them with an empty expression, as if she had been waiting for a long time. "I knew you'd end up here," she said, her voice cold and distant. "How? Did you know we were coming?" Lara asked, her heart racing. Clara didn't respond immediately, just observing them with an unsettling calm. "I've been here before. And like you, I couldn't leave," Clara replied, her lifeless eyes reflecting the sadness of years of solitude. Now more apprehensive, Lara and Gabriel tried to focus on how to escape, but Clara's words began to haunt them. "This library has its own secrets," Clara said with a forced smile, as if she had been marked by something she couldn't understand or escape. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker, and the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors of the library, as if someone were coming. But when Lara looked around, she saw nothing but shadows stretching across the room. "We need to get out of here now," Gabriel whispered, grabbing Lara's hand. But before they could act, Clara slowly got up and walked toward a bookshelf at the back of the room. She pulled a seemingly random book, and with a snap, the room seemed to tremble slightly. The secret door slammed shut on its own, locking them inside. "What did you do?" Gabriel yelled, trying to push the door, but it wouldn't budge. "We can't leave. Not until we understand," Clara replied, her tone more of a warning than an explanation. "Something keeps her here. Something much older than any of us." Lara, feeling a growing pressure in her chest, looked at Clara, her eyes filled with unanswered questions. "What do you mean by that? What is this thing?" Clara looked down at the floor, her lips moving as she whispered, "The library doesn't let people leave. It takes those who love its books the most." The air seemed to grow heavier. A deep silence enveloped them, until a low, continuous sound began to emanate from the bookshelves, as if something was moving in the shadows. Before Lara and Gabriel could react, a figure appeared in the doorway, its silhouette hazy. Clara immediately recognized it. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, more to herself than to the others. The figure took a step toward them, and the lights began to flicker erratically, casting distorted shadows across the room. Clara stepped back, but the figure, becoming more defined, spoke with a deep, authoritative voice. "You should never have come." Panic took hold of Lara and Gabriel as they tried to understand what was happening. The bookshelves around them seemed to move, as if the library itself was alive, watching them. "We're leaving now," Lara said, pulling Gabriel by the hand. They ran to the door, but when they opened it, they found themselves back in the library corridor, as if time had reset itself. They were trapped again, and now there was no way back. The feeling of being trapped in the library intensified. Lara and Gabriel were once again in the corridor, the echoes of their footsteps sounding uncomfortably loud. The air was heavy, almost thick, and the distant sound of Clara's breathing seemed to resonate, like a reminder of the dark presence surrounding them. "This doesn't make sense," Gabriel said, his voice trembling with frustration. The door opened. "Why are we back here?" Lara looked at him, her eyes still fixed on the slightly open door. "I don't know. I don't understand what's happening, but I feel like we can't just leave." Clara, still in the room behind them, remained silent, her empty eyes watching them with a deep, distant gaze. She seemed to know something they still couldn't comprehend. Lara tried to call out to her, but her words got stuck in her throat, as if something else was preventing her from speaking. It was as if an invisible force had taken control of the place. "Clara, what's happening?" Lara asked, her eyes filled with fear and curiosity. The senior girl didn't answer immediately. She took a slow step toward them, and the silence of the library became even heavier. "The library doesn't let people leave. Not the way they think they can. It's happened before with others." Gabriel took a step back, suspicious, but Lara couldn't look away from Clara's figure. Something in her voice, in her eyes, seemed so deeply sad and resigned that Lara felt a wave of compassion mixed with fear. "Are you saying we're stuck here? Forever?" Gabriel asked, his voice filled with panic. Clara nodded slowly. "The library chooses its visitors. Not everyone stays, but the ones it chooses never leave. Not until they understand what it wants." With each word Clara spoke, the air around them seemed to grow denser, and the shadows on the bookshelves stretched as if they were closing in. Lara felt a chill run down her spine. Suddenly, the library lights began flickering even more, and the feeling of being watched intensified. The shadow of a figure, almost invisible, passed quickly by the room's window, making Lara and Gabriel freeze. The figure. It seemed human, but with a strange presence, distorted by the dimness. Its eyes were fixed on them. "Who is it?" Lara whispered, almost breathless. Clara looked toward the door, her expression filled with fear. "Don't look at her. Not now. Not before you understand." Lara and Gabriel exchanged a glance, both feeling the urge to leave but also sensing an invisible force holding them frozen in place. I can't stay here," Gabriel said, trying to push away the panic. He took a step toward the door, but before he could reach it, the figure in the window appeared again, now with an expression of frozen anger. The figure began to move closer, moving quickly, and the shadows seemed to come to life, curling around the walls and bookshelves as the lights flickered frantically. "No. Don't look at her," Clara shouted, running to place herself between them and the door. She will. But it was too late. The sound of a scream, sharp and supernatural, echoed through the library, making the shelves tremble and the air vibrate with a dense energy. The figure, now clearer, advanced with empty eyes and a distorted smile, as if it were feeding off their fear. Gabriel tried to push Clara aside, but she stopped him. "You can't leave. Not without her." "Her? Who is she?" Lara asked, her voice filled with desperation. Clara looked directly at her, her expression now dark and weary. "She is the library, and she will choose who stays." The library seemed to come alive, with the shadows becoming denser, the light weakening. Lara and Gabriel felt an overwhelming pressure on their bodies, as if the very structure of the school was sucking their strength away. "We can't escape," Clara murmured, her eyes filled with sadness. "Just accept what she wants." Gabriel and Lara looked at each other, their hearts pounding uncontrollably. There was no way out, no more choice. They were at the mercy of the library, and any attempt to flee now seemed futile. The air closed in around them as the figure in the window smiled, waiting. The silence in the library was broken by the sound of the shelves creaking and the lights flickering frantically. Lara and Gabriel were paralyzed, not knowing what to do, while Clara, with a distant and sad look, seemed to have surrendered to that distorted reality. The pressure in the air was almost unbearable, and a sense of despair spread throughout Lara's body. "I can't stay here," Gabriel murmured, his voice trembling. He took another step toward the door, determined to leave, but the figure in the window began to approach even faster. Its empty eyes and macabre smile became clearer with every second. He could no longer look at the figure without feeling his heart race even more. Don't look at her," Clara screamed, her eyes watering, but she seemed powerless, as if she had already accepted her fate. You have to understand, she won't let you leave unless..." But Clara didn't finish the sentence. The air around them seemed to compress even more, until Lara and Gabriel felt a wave of heat that seemed to come from the walls of the library itself. The shadows of the shelves began to move like silhouettes, and a faint, distant laugh echoed through the shelves. They were being watched by something much older than they could imagine. "Gabriel, we need to leave now," Lara screamed, her voice desperate, pulling him firmly by the hand. She knew there was no more time to hesitate. They couldn't wait any longer for an explanation that would never come. With one final surge, Gabriel, still terrified, twisted the doorknob, hoping that, by some miracle, it would finally give. The knob moved with a creak, but the door remained closed. They were trapped again. But in that moment, what seemed impossible happened. A thunderous sound echoed through the library, as if the building itself had given way. The door swung open at once, as if pushed by an invisible force. Without looking back, they ran down the empty hallway, their footsteps echoing like the beats of a hurried heart. The air outside the library felt fresher, but fear still pulsed in their veins. When they reached the school's main door, they realized that the sound of the rain had disappeared, and the silence was absolute. They were outside the library, but they were not free. They glanced back one last time, and what they saw made them stop in their tracks. The library was still there, but the windows were covered by a thick fog, and the doors, now open, beckoned them back as if they knew that somehow they could never escape. "We can't go back there," Gabriel whispered, his eyes fixed on the library entrance. She's waiting." Lara, with tears in her eyes, looked at him. "We never should have gone there. But now we have to live with it. That library, it will always follow us." With one last exchange of glances, they turned their backs on the school and walked toward the street, knowing that the experience had changed them forever. They would never return to the library. But a part of them knew that, somewhere deep in their minds, the shadows of that room would continue to watch, waiting for the moment when they would forget their promise, and the temptation would call them back. The library, with its secrets and sinister presence, was still there. And they knew that what they had found was not the end, but only the beginning of something much greater. Something that, perhaps, they should have never discovered.